We've already seen what our quadratic equations look like in their standard form. Now I want to talk about the other two forms that I mentioned in a previous video. So the other two forms are basically going to be your vertex form, and it's going to be your factorized form. And there are methods to basically go from this standard form into these two forms, the vertex form and the factorized form. If you want to note this down, go ahead and note it down. But the method that you use to convert from your standard form to your vertex form, we call that method completing the square method. So we call this completing the square method. Okay, and then for factorization, we basically use a method that we call middle term break, which you guys have probably been using since your 8th or 9th grade. Your vertex form is actually not the same as your standard form, and it looks something like this. So you would have an a over here, you would have maybe an x in there, and then a plus b whole squared, and then a plus c. That's what your vertex form looks like. And then your factorized form may look something like you may have your a, and you may have your x plus b, x plus c, and this may be your factorized form. Now, one thing I want to clear right off the bat is that the b in the standard form is not the same as the b over here or the b over here. And what I mean by that, I'll basically do an example and I'll show you guys what I mean by that. So if I just take this first example over here, and I'll show you guys how I can convert this quadratic expression from its standard form to its vertex form. You can clearly see right now it's in its standard form. I'm going to write that over here, and I'm going to convert this into its vertex form. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to basically get this x without any coefficient, or with the coefficient of 1. That's what you're trying to do. So right now we can clearly see that this x squared has a 2 next to it. So we don't want to do that. That's the first thing you want to get rid of. If you're trying to convert your standard form to your vertex form, and you have a coefficient that is not 1, you want to get rid of that coefficient. So that's what I'm going to do. So how can I get rid of that 2? Well, I can take that 2 common out of all of these three terms, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take that 2 common out, and that's just going to be 2x squared. So this is going to be 4x, and I can't really take 2 common out of 5, so I can just write it like this, 5 over 2. Okay, now what you want to do is you basically want to look at this middle term. And what you want to do is you want to divide this thing by 2. Not the x, but just the number 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide 4 by 2. You always want to half that middle term. I'm going to have that middle term, and I'm going to get 2. Now what you want to do is you basically want to write it out like this. So you want to put the 2 over there, you're going to have your x squared, you're going to have your 4x, and what you're going to do is you're basically going to write everything the same, and you're just going to leave this space in the middle. And I'll tell you what you guys have to do with this space. So with this space, this number that you got from having this 4, when you have this 4, you got a 2. What you want to do is you want to put a plus 2 squared in here, and you want to put a minus 2 squared in here. That's what you want to do. Okay, so I'm going to go over the steps. What you want to do is you want to get rid of this coefficient right here with the x squared term, any coefficient. If it's 1, that's fine. If it's any other coefficient, get rid of that by taking common. The next thing you want to do is you want to basically take this middle term and you want to half it. Once you half it, you basically write everything the same, and you just leave some space right over here. Between, oh, there's a plus over here. Between this term, this bx and this c, you just want to leave some space. In that space, this number that you got, you are going to put a plus next to it and square that. You're going to put a minus next to it and square that. And then what you're going to do is in the next step, you're basically going to make 2 brackets like so. And you're going to put a square on those brackets. And then you're going to close this bracket over here. Now what you're going to do is those last two terms, these guys, you're going to put them in here just as they are. So that's just going to be negative 2 squared plus 5 by 2, right, as they are. And what you're going to do with these first 3 terms is that from the first term, you're going to take this x, drop it in here. So that's going to be an x. Remember, you're not going to write the squares. That's all of the squares have already been accounted for by this thing over here. So you're just going to take the x. You're not going to take the square. From the next term, you're going to take the sign. And the sign over there is a positive sign. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take this over here and you're going to put that over here. So a 2 in here. And remember, don't drag the square down. Don't drag the square down in this bracket because we already have a square right over here. And then all you want to do is you just want to simplify this. So we're just going to simplify this. And how are we going to simplify this? Well, you can solve this out. So this is going to be, I'm going to write my x plus 2 over here. Of course, there's that square up there. And when you simplify this, so let me just do that. It's minus 2 squared. And then it's going to be, hold on. So it's minus 2 squared plus 5 by 2. That's going to be negative 3 by 2. Okay, and now what you want to do is you just want to take this 2, multiply it with this bracket, and you multiply it with that thing over there. So we're going to do that. And remember, you don't go ahead and expand this bracket because we just created this bracket. Okay, we had this initial standard form, and we created a bracket right over here at this step. So don't go and expand this bracket because then you would just defeat the whole process. You just created a bracket and you don't want to open it. You don't expand that. So you multiply 2 over here. This is going to be 2x plus 2 squared, and then you multiply the 2 over here. So this is just going to be negative 3. And you can see now this right here is in your vertex form. So this is a, this is x plus b whole squared plus c. And of course the c over here was minus 3, so if you put a minus 3 over here, it's going to turn into that same thing. But what I want to show you guys over here is that if you look at this thing right over here, and this thing, and you take the initial equation that you have, so it was something like 2x squared plus 8x plus 5, so this is going to be ax squared plus bx plus c. What I want you guys to see is that this b over here was 8, but this b over here is 2. So these b's are not the same. You can't just be like, okay, well, I have a b over here, let's just, or I have a b over here, this is 8, so I'm just going to put this in there and get my vertex form like that. It's not going to work. You'll actually have to do all of these steps that I showed over here to get your vertex form. So the a is similar, which is, I guess that's not coincidental, but the b's are not the same. And the c over here is -3, the c over there is +5. So the b's and the c's, they may not be the same. These forms may have their own a's and their own b's and their own c's. Now, looking at this, is this thing right over here, is this thing going to be a smiley face, or is this going to be a sad face? Now, I know that this thing is going to be a smiley face. Why? Because the a is actually a positive value, and positivity contributes to smiley faces. So this right over here is actually a really important step. This is called completing the square, and you want to practice this on as much equations as possible, and you want to get this method down because this is going to be really, really important. So I'm going to go ahead, and now I have this form right over here, the standard equation, standard quadratic form. What I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this into the factorized form. So this is x squared minus 5x plus 6, and I believe everyone knows how to do this because you all have been doing middle term breaks since your 9th grade or something, so I hope you guys are at least efficient at this. What I'm going to do is, obviously, the coefficient of x is 1 over here, so you just multiply 1 with 6, and that is going to be 6. So now you're basically looking for two numbers, and when you add those numbers, you should get this -5. So it's going to be, I'm just not going to write that 1 over there, I'm going to write the x squared, and I'm going to have my plus 6 over here. So what two numbers are going to give me -5, okay? And they may be -2 and -3. So when I multiply these two numbers, I get +6, and when I add these two numbers, I get -5. So I'm going to use these two. This is -2x. That right there is going to be -3x. And so now all we got to do is we just got to take common. So it's going to be x minus 2 in there, and then I'm going to take a -3 common. So this is going to be x minus 2 in there. And so all I'm left with is x minus 3 as well as x minus 2. Now, over here, this is our factorized form. You can clearly see it's in the form ax plus b and x plus c. So the c over here is actually -2, and the b over here is actually -3. So you can basically see, and the a over here is obviously just going to be 1. Since we have nothing over there, we clearly know it's going to be 1.